A very special show today because we're exploring literally the entire idea of how a mobile phone, the industry, the selling, the marketing of it can be completely and totally changed. A company that came into India just a while back and has completely redefined the way we think of, the way we buy, and the way we move on forward with the mobile phone that we use. Fans, something we didn't know existed in the mobile phone industry. Loyalty and organic growth and online sales. One company defined it here in India, Xiaomi, and with me is the man himself who defined or redefined India. Hugo, very, very, very big welcome back to India. You've just completed, just a short while back, a very epic launch, very impressive. Talkatora Stadium, 2,500 people or so, fans wearing a particular kind of a t-shirt, you had your 100 explorers in the front. So very well thought out, but you're just continuing with what you've done well, that your launches are almost perfect. But let's move on now to a few other things about Xiaomi that a lot of people are talking about. Like I said right in the beginning to introduce you in the show, Xiaomi came in and redefined how a phone is thought of, how a phone is bought. You brought emotion into the buying of a mobile phone. We didn't do that before, right? We had loyalty for product and brand, not emotion. But now, since some time has gone by, people are still loyalists, but out of 10 people who still think Xiaomi is amazing, one is starting to falter. Let me take you through one or two scenarios, right? You came in with a price promise, a phone at a price point, a phone so awesome, at such an awesome price point that nobody could touch it. You're the only one that came in online with an amplified way. Now others are starting to replicate that exact same thing that you do. Where does that leave you?
First of all, Rajiv, thank you for having me at the show.
Absolutely.
Once again,
always my pleasure.
It's great to be in India. It's great to be here. So it's been about a year and a half since we first launched here in India, and we started with Mi 3, which was a surprise for everyone at the time because it was the first, flagship grade device under 20,000 rupees. And we've brought many other surprises to the market since. We've brought new processors. For example, we were the first company to launch a Qualcomm 615 based device here when we launched Mi 4i last year. It was a big launch. You were there. And that's the reputation that we've begun to acquire here in India over the last year and a half. Is Xiaomi is a company that always surprises us with something new. India always has something magical saved for us. And we just brought our next magic, our surprise that people weren't expecting. We came to India with a metal body device with an incredible processor, a massive battery, and just an amazing product experience, right? Which at the end of the day is what people cared about. And we were able to bring it here at just under 10,000 rupees, right? That's Redmi Note 3, which you also saw last week. So everyone is celebrating this product in the same way that they celebrated Mi 3 when it first came out, right? The Xiaomi magic is here once again.
But if I go with something interesting that happened, IDC came up with a report of top few cities and where a particular phone stands, and the staggering headline was Apple beats Xiaomi and takes this position. Now, of course, if you go deeper into the report, it's not as staggering, but it is a headline, and that's the headline that is reported on, spoken about, and discussed and analyzed, right? What does that really mean to you? Apple, a super premium product, almost every product would be about, at a bare minimum, 2 to 3 times your price point, right? How do you react to a headline and a news, something like this from IDC?
Yeah, so first of all, I think we have to think about how this data is measured, right? In the second half of last year, and I think this data refers to Q4 specifically, was the period when we shifted from importing into manufacturing, right? And measuring locally manufactured devices is far more difficult than measuring imports. We also, those reports also look at sell-in data, meaning they look at how many units were sold into the stores, into the channels.
Put into the system rather than the
put into the system. Whereas we like to look at sell-out. So I think the counterpoint that I would offer is the following. If you were to look at our actual sell-out data, how many devices did we sell in Q4? And if you were to look at the market that we're part of, which is the online segment, we practically only sell online here in India. We have actually maintained our number 3 position in the ranking from the beginning of 2015 all through Q2, Q3, and Q4. And in fact, in Q4, we were very close to being the number 2. And by the way, these numbers have been increasing substantially quarter over quarter when you look at shipments. What's interesting to realize is that the market for smartphones here in India is moving online very quickly. In the summer of 2014, when we entered the market, about 10% of smartphones here in India were sold online. In Q4, data from IDC, in fact, says about 35 to 37% of smartphones are now sold online. So picture this. So Xiaomi is this small company that just entered the market. They've managed to very quickly conquer the third position in the ranking of online smartphones, perhaps back in a time when that market was still small, so not as meaningful. But as the market shifted towards online, our number 3 position was maintained. And by the way, everybody else in that ranking are companies that are far larger than us, and we've been in India for a very long time. Right? So smartphones sold online, e-commerce, that's the market that we're part of. That's how we measure our performance, and our position there remains incredibly strong.
Okay, and the interesting part you've spoken about is the online market. Now, at various times when I've met you, I've got various kind of thought processes from you about online versus offline and an omni-channel approach, right? At one time you had said that, I threw out this fact that, people would want this phone, but that's at that time, I think the total sellout rate was about 18% of the total number of smartphones sold were online. I said, you still have 82% of the market that either cannot access or cannot get your product. And you had said, yes, we will go offline. But since that point to now, it seems like it's more a formality of having completed that promise than a true strategy to go offline too. So which is it? Are you an online company that is just kind of touching offline and seeing it? You're just touching the water to see if it's well worth swimming? Or are you really going to have a true offline strategy?
So right now, Rajiv, it's really more the former. We are experimenting with the offline market. And our ability to experiment with the offline market right now is limited for one particular reason. It's actually demand. The demand on online is very, very, very high, and we want to satisfy basically all of that demand before we go offline.
Okay.
Because that's the more dynamic market. That's where the tech-savvy consumers primarily shop. That's where we create the organic word of mouth, sort of the ambassadors and so on and so forth. So we really want to serve the online market very, very, very well. Mm-hmm. And then with spare cycles, we really want to continue to explore the offline market more. We do think that the offline market in India is likely to evolve. There's some consolidation forces at play, which I think might make it potentially very interesting in the year or so to come. But more important here is to observe the migration path, right? It's likely that the e-commerce market for smartphones in India, maybe sometime next year, will be as big as the offline market. Right?
Just half of it?
What I'm saying is that it might be half and half, sometime in the next 2 years. Right?
But actually, that's not. I mean, if we take it to be that it is about 35% or so now,
right,
and another whole year will add another 15% to a fairly large market.
Conceivable.
Now, it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
That's sure, exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, now let's come down to what I think is the crunch question, right? And this is, I started off by hinting about this right in the beginning. Let's get a little bit more in depth. You come into India, you redefine, like I said, how we think of a phone, how we buy a phone, and what we do after, which is you have fans and you have explorers, and they take forward how you buy your next phone. You obviously are a gateway to other companies in China who have similar ambitions but just didn't know how the Indian market operated. India seemed to be a bit of a taboo area because, what we did, nobody else did. How we bought, nobody else did. But you've shown them there's a gateway, there's a method, there is a method to our madness here in India, and you defined it, right? You obviously made this easier for other companies to come in. And like I said, a lot of them think they can do a Xiaomi on Xiaomi now, right? Price aggression, tick. Extreme amplification, full page ad in the papers, tick. Only online, tick. Fan base creation, organic growth, tick. How do you become a Xiaomi when everybody else is also a Xiaomi? How do you continue to remain ahead of the pack if everybody else is a Xiaomi? And most importantly, will you remain the Xiaomi or will there be others who will become the Xiaomis, and you will become behind them.
So it's interesting you say this, because this is the story of our lives back in our home market in China for the past few years. Of course, people saw this tremendously innovative approach of selling, of doing marketing via social media, and so on and so forth. And of course, companies have attempted to copy us as well. So the tactics that we're seeing here in India are very similar to what we've seen before in our home market. So we understand what's happening very, very well. And it's one thing to say it. It's one thing to try to portray a company as being this young company that is cool with the fans, that understands social media, that lives comfortably in that world. It's another thing to actually really, really be that deep inside. I spend a significant amount of time with the fans here, the real fans, people who have been following us for the past year and a half, who buy every single one of our phones all the time, and I don't even talk about it. I don't even blog about it often, because what matters is the richness of that interaction, because I get insight from them. I get product ideas from them. And the interaction itself inspires other fans because they're talking to their friends, all the time. So it's one thing to have these interactions, and I'm just talking about the fan part. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to boast, hey, we have all these fans, and so on and so forth. But can you really develop a relationship with a community? Can you build upon that, layer over layer over layer, which, by the way, takes quite a bit of time. Right? Community building is one of the hardest things on the internet, because the next community is just next door and you can just go there with a click. So it takes time to do this. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm also not criticizing those who have tried. I'm just saying it's really tough to do it, and it takes a long time.
We'll take a break right now. I know it's getting really interesting with the kind of conversation me and Hugo are having, but here's the promise that I'll make. When I come back, I'll try and see if I can get Hugo to tell me a little bit more about the Mi 5, including the price. I know I can't pin him down, but I shall try.